The 2022 IMMAF Pan American Championships will be held in Monterrey, Mexico from June 22nd to the 24th. The best amateur MMA competitors in the Pan Americas will be there, including Team Guyana. Joining us, we've got executives from the Guyanese Mixed Martial Arts Federation Board. We've got Mr. Roland Fanfare, who's the technical director of the Guyanese MMA Federation, and Dr. Sawan Jagnarain, the head of medical for the athletes. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good evening. Good evening.
And good evening to you too.
Good evening. Starting with Mr. Roland Fanfare, can you tell us a little bit about your role with the Guyanese Mixed Martial Arts Federation?
Great. So my role within the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation is a twofold role. It starts with me being the technical director of the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts, and also I act as also assistant coach. I have with me on my team Coach Bruce Fraser and Coach Troy Bob.
Okay, and now on to you, Doctor.
Hi, good evening to our viewers. What I would say, first would like to say thank you for having us on your program. It's very informative. The work that you're doing, I just want to congratulate you and wish you well.
Thank you.
First and foremost, the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts is a constituted body that's registered, and under the IMMAF, we are here on the full membership, and I am on the executive body as the medical and anti-doping person.
Right on. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and it'll be interesting to hear more about anti-doping, which is a very important theme for all sports, including amateur MMA. First off, gentlemen, please give us a brief overview of the combat sports scene and community in Guyana. How popular is mixed martial arts, and how developed is the amateur mixed martial arts scene and, dare I say, ecosystem? And please don't tell me cricket is a combat sport.
Okay, so I'll start, and I'll have Dr. Sawan fill in with his part of it. First of all, we have tried. We first have a National Sports Commission that is responsible for mixed martial arts and all martial arts sports within the Guyana, and not only martial arts, for most sports within Guyana. Added to that, our president is an avid sportsman. He loves cricket and some other sports. And of course, he is very integral in having this commission as functional as possible, to ensure that we cater to the various sports that they have. As it relates to mixed martial arts, we have a number of martial arts schools within Guyana, mostly Shotokan, a few judo and jiu-jitsu clubs. We have a little bit of sambo, and we also have, if I'm not wrong, we have various types of Shotokan karate, like Wadaru and some of the other styles there. The mixed martial arts clubs we have here are very small, and with the help of the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation, we are trying to bring them into the fold so as to be able to ensure that the sport can be populated throughout our nation.
Right on. And I think it's just important also to mention, in terms of, for those who are not familiar as to where Guyana is, it's a country in South America, of course, with a population of, would you say, 800,000 people or so?
750,000.
750,000. And I think at the last Olympic Summer Games, you guys sent 7 competitors in 4 sports: athletics, boxing, swimming, and table tennis. So it's great to see that boxing is one of the sports representing the country. Of course, it's a combat sport. Now, I have a question for you, Doctor. IMMAF achieved WADA signatory status. It's a gold standard in clean MMA. Like, that's been formally recognized by the World Anti-Doping Association. It's essentially joined the global anti-doping movement. Now, question for you, which is very significant, of course. How important is this for the sport, its integrity, but also for the health and safety of the athletes and competitors? And I have a follow-up question for you as well on that.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So basically, I just want to start with something that is actually I want the public to know. That is, the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation is a very young, it's not mature federation. It's probably 18 months or close to 24 months old. And it's a federation that actually worked with IMMAF, with its timeline, with its growth, with its policies over the last 2 years, and it has reached its mandate. Um, within the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation, we thought it was best to select persons in their strategic area that they're competent in. And that is how I was actually selected as being the medical person on the federation. To be honest with you, I have no background in mixed martial arts or any form of karate. No, nothing of the sort. So for me, it was actually a learning experience. And what was important is that, we all had to be accredited. So I had to get myself accredited with WADA. And, you had to present this to IMMAF because you have to fit their policy that they actually adhere to. So at that time, we ensure we got everybody in line and certified. Um, and we started to stress with our athletes that, the integrity of any sport, and especially mixed martial arts,
Right.
is one that is key. Because we want a fair environment. And if we're going to go out there to compete, Guyana is now hitting the map. All right. And we as athletes, we don't want to tarnish our country. So we are going to go there and we're going to showcase our country. We are going to be clean athletes. We're going to be competitive athletes. We're going to adhere to anti-doping policies and regulations. We are ready to be screened at all times. We are continue educating our athletes regularly on anti-doping, right? We are open to questions. We are open to twinning mechanisms where they can actually rely on us on what is happening. And I believe this is actually what Mr. Brown actually wants, because, he relates a number of things about anti-doping, and he stressed a lot of anti-doping measures because he wants the sport to grow. In the Caribbean, it's not as huge as it is in Europe.
Right.
Or the Middle East. But Guyana has grown and it's growing still. And so far, I believe that we are the fastest growing federation
Right.
in MMA, if possible. If possible.
For sure. No, it's very fascinating. I have some questions to follow up on a few points you've raised, but one that I want to follow up on immediately is the topic, of testing protocol. Can you give us just a general summary of what the testing protocol is for MMA, amateur MMA?
So IMMAF has a regulatory body, follows the WADA protocol. So
Right.
the WADA protocol, I must state that because that is what it adheres to. So what happens is that you have screening mechanisms. Our screening mechanism entails a local screening, which is on the federation level, where athletes are all screened because every 6 months screening is supposed to be done, right? We haven't actually sent up an athlete that is more than 6 months since our federation has started, right? Because when the federation started, you ensure that your executives are actually trained and qualified and accredited with IMMAF. Then you get your athletes where you're exposed to championships. So basically, at this point in time, we did our local screening, and our local screening for IMMAF entails you must be physically fit. You must pass all anti-doping measures. Remember, it's a close contact sport. So IMMAF has, blood policy levels. So persons they want to be screened for HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B. All right, because you remember the integrity of the sports is crucial.
Right.
So you need to ensure that you don't create any harm. Though it's a combat sport, you do not create any harm on your medical aspect. All right, because
Right.
spillage of blood is actually very common. And some of the tests that we had to do, we had to go far as doing a P24 antigen test for HIV, which actually give us it tells us if this individual is infected within the first 12 to 18 days, right? So it's very thorough, and at any point in time, you can be pulled, an athlete can be pulled and be screened.
Right.
At any point in time, whether it's locally, regionally, or internationally. All right. And at an international level, so before every event, an athlete is actually screened. All right. They do the urine test, they do their blood test. All right. Everything intact. So they have to correlate everything that we said here locally to what is actually presented to them. So IMMAF has a screening mechanism that is very thorough, and I must commend the individuals who are managing that process.
It's very important, and I'm actually we're going to go back to something you mentioned in terms of education. I have a few follow up questions on that, but before we do that, I was just reading a lot about the federation, and there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm and optimism for the sport and its development and the athletes in terms of their potential, which is incredible. Like I've been researching, I've been following the story, looking at some articles from the country and abroad, and there's a lot of hype and a lot of positive energy, and it's really interesting to see for mixed martial arts, particularly in the Americas, obviously in the Caribbean. I believe you guys are leading the way. You're a model for amateur MMA development. Now, the team competed at the 2022 Worlds, right, in Abu Dhabi. Tell us how they did there, and what do you think the athletes and coaching staff took away from that experience? What were some of the lessons learned as far as training, competing, and their vision moving forward?
I'm very happy you asked that question. I think experience has a lot to do with it, but given the chance that the guys got to participate in the event, which we must thank the IMMAF for, we're very happy that we had the exposure as one of the youngest clubs, and that we could have sent two key athletes up there to make sure that, we had a representation there. While their progress may not have been as optimal as it should have, they would have been able to learn from that experience. And, we are now, as we're planning for the Pan Am Championships and the training and everything else, we're using those experiences that we would have gained there to be able to fine tune. And this is a growing process for us, because most of the guys are just basically, not fully, or I would say they're really, really what we would call amateurs in the event. And for them as amateurs to go into the stage, into the arena, at least give their best effort, gives us a chance to see where they need work, where we can coach them better, what we need to implement from their experience, and try to fine tune them for the future matches coming up.
How would you say has the coaching approach or strategy has it changed in terms of, you mentioned there's things to fine tune. What exactly are you fine tuning? If you can give us an example.
Well, one of the key things that we didn't notice is that the atmosphere in Guyana is quite different from some of the atmospheres in some of the other countries with a higher altitude.
Right.
So we for sure need to develop more stamina and to be able to train to be able to handle those altitudes that we have. So we're doing stress testing. We're going and do excessive jogging exercises with masks, without masks. And then after that, we go into the arena and we start training, under that stress, right? To see how they cope under that pressure. It's 2 to 3 minutes of fighting. And, we try to put them through that after to see what their conditioning is like. So that was one of the key things that we did. we did mix up some of the coaching techniques. Like we mixed the coaches instead of just having, one coach training them. We started mixing the coaches at different intervals, so that they can learn from the different specialties that comes with each coach. So that was another area in which we worked with that, and we're still continuing to implement and try new strategies, to see how the athletes would stand up against, the training. So we have a lot of work to do. Like Dr. Sawan would have indicated, we were only 18 months into it,
Right.
but we are doing our utmost to bring out the best athletes that we can for the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation and also for the international arena for the IMMAF.
Right, and as I was mentioning, thank you for that, sir. Now, as I was mentioning, starting with before I said the question, I spoke about the enthusiasm, and I mean, I'm seeing that in some of the video clips from the media and interviews with other members of the board and so on. There's a lot of hype and which is fantastic. But I'm curious to know, guys, what is it about MMA in Guyana that is so on fire right now? Because it's interesting to watch as an outsider to see that there's so much passion from people speaking about MMA in this country. We know that in South America, one of the powerhouse nations for mixed martial arts, amateur or pro, of course, is Brazil, and that's a neighbor to your south, right?
Yes.
So, and you guys are just to the north. So speak to us about Guyana, its culture in terms of its passion for combat sports, please. But both of you.
I let Dr. Sawan weigh in on this because we were having a discussion a little earlier, and he had some key points and some very good information that we were cross-referencing and stuff like that. So I let him step in because he was very passionate about that part. So I let him share that part with you.
Let's hear it, doctor. Let's hear it.
All right. So basically, I don't know why Fanfare is just giving me all this praise, but basically what I'm saying is that, as you mentioned earlier, the facts is out there. I don't know if you know of Carlton Harris.
Oh, no, I don't.
He fights in Brazil. He's actually in Brazil, but he's a Guyanese.
Okay.
So he actually won. He's in the UFC. He has actually put the flag of Guyana on the map. So it actually awakened the sport in Guyana, because in Guyana, as Mr. Fanfare has outlined, we have at a policy level, there is started to have some changes when it comes to sports that are not very popular, like the mixed martial arts. And having seen what is happening with the executives, what they're trying to do and what they're propelling for youths in Guyana, and we are trying to get more youths involved. We are trying to get persons from the police force also playing a part. But all in all, you have to remember, right? This is a building process, right? So as we go along, the hype starts. So you find, remember, this is young in Guyana. So what happens, you find that the private sector starts to trickles itself into the sport, right? And we must compliment the Bihari group of companies who have actually worked with us and ensure we have sponsorship under their franchise brand, KFC. So it's actually, growing. You have other persons are now coming to join this momentum. So it's actually growing, and people are getting more interested into our local fighters, our local athletes. But this whole thing of becoming a mixed martial arts athlete, it's a very, very tedious process. And persons, you have to be in it to understand it. Though you may be good, though you may be an exceptional athlete, we are still young in this. And the international community, you have persons in Russia who's actually have training probably since they were 4 years old or 2 years old compared to us. So we are actually ready for the challenge. We want to make a mark. We want to stand out.
Very, very interesting. I appreciate all those points. And I did Google Carlton Harris. He's 17-5, and he fights in the UFC. I'll be following his matches moving forward. But it's interesting what you mentioned in terms of the entire ecosystem of the community supporting the sport, not just the athletes, but as you mentioned, the private sector, and all those aspects are key. And also looking at, professional development in terms of like the athletes, but also the coaching staff and so on. I want to ask you this question. I want to ask both of you this question. From your point of view, and we'll start with you, Doctor, is amateur MMA a safe sport? And I'm asking you this because you're a doctor, and I thought I'd put you on the spot first. What are your thoughts on amateur mixed martial art? Is it a safe sport?
So first of all, you need to understand one thing. What do you define as safe? What do we define as safe? Are we saying that, is it a physical form of hurt that we are actually worried about? Or are we saying that it's because of an individual using illicit drug that can put them at a position where they can be injured, they can worsen their mental and physical well-being?
Right.
So you have to know what is your interpretation, or what do you understand by safe? So I don't know which one you're asking about.
Right. That's a good point. The sport has a history where it began, from the early days of professional mixed martial arts were very different from where they are now, right? Right now, it's a professional sport, lots of rules and regulations at all levels, as you both are well aware of. And obviously, amateur MMA is leading the way in terms of having these rules and regulations, everything from anti-doping to, concussions and all that. There's a lot of rules and standard. I guess the reason why I asked that, it's because we're all aware that there's still a portion of people who may not see this sport in terms of it's a combat sport, right? Boxing is a combat sport. Freestyle wrestling is a combat sport. Greco-Roman wrestling is a combat sport. Judo is a combat sport. Karate, all of these core sports are Olympic sports. And they're all brutally tough, right? They're all tough on the body, and yes, it's violence, right? It's a sporting violence. And I guess the reason why I ask you from the point of view of a medical doctor, knowing the rules of the game, of the sport, not just in terms of the regulations within the Octagon, but also the rules outside of it in terms of, as you mentioned, anti-doping, and so on. Overall assessment from that, is it a safe sport?
So basically, first, to answer your question, IMMF actually has a selection criteria for an athlete, which is key in this sport. You must be someone who's physically fit and healthy. You must clear all medical checks and records, right? You must adhere to WADA protocol, right? You must be trained under a certified coach, right? You must be willing to enter the Octagon, right? You must be someone of good standing, all right?
Right.
And added to that, what they do under the protocol of WADA, they always ensure the optimal health of that athlete. If the athletes are having depression, they have diabetes, or they have asthma, these are things that you need to review, because sometimes we don't put them in, right? They may be using drugs that can prevent them from performing to the highest standard, all right?
Right.
We also have to ensure their optimal musculoskeletal health. We can't ensure that this person probably have injury the day before and we're putting them to fight. That is inhumane, right? And when you go to IMMAF, you're signing a documented form that you're willing to do this. We also ensure that we prevent injuries. We also ensure that review the medications that the individuals are using, which is important, right? We also develop a professional relationship with the athlete. And if you know, in Guyana, we are trying to start some leadership programs among the small clubs, right? Especially we starting with the Guyana Police Force as our pilot club. So you, all in all, when you give them all of this and you give them the education of anti-doping, of the medical reach, remember, all in all, they accept this. They said, yes, I want to be a part of this. I like this. I want to be a fighter. I want to get in the ring, the Octagon, right? We have to ensure that the athlete's physical, mental, and social well-being is created in an environment so that they actually respect the Guyanese society, respect the IMMAF Federation, right? And all in all, we want the best for the athlete and the best for the sport.
Very interesting, and it's the topic of mental health is an interesting one. You know, when you speak of health, you speak of physical health, but you also mentioned mental health, which is an interesting one because that's key to one's health overall. But in combat sports, I think there's a huge role sports psychology plays in one's performance, but beyond that, also overall mental health and their mental health well-being. Now, Roland, that question in terms of safety was just really well answered by the doctor. But I want to know, because you're a karateka, right? You practice karate.
Yes, I'm a Dan Shotokan karate instructor.
Awesome. I'm curious to know, as someone who's trained in karate, as you mentioned, you're a fifth dan. Now you're also coaching MMA, and karate is known traditionally as really exerting, or presenting a lot of core values in terms of respect, dignity, and all those things that we know through traditional martial arts to be at least how it's marketed for certain younger demographics. It has those values. What are as a karateka and also now as an MMA coach, is MMA safe, and also does amateur mixed martial arts have values?
Great. Great question. And just to add to what Doctor would have said, from the technical aspect of it, I would say off the bat, yes. I've competed internationally and nationally in many karate tournaments. And not to toot my own horns, I started karate at a very young age of 30, right? And when I started, I am about 15 years in the sport. And I have taken away from that 14 bronze, 5 gold, 5 silver internationally.
Wow.
So I've competed. I have competed against some of the best in Canada, some of the best in Trinidad, in Barbados, in Jamaica. And to come out unscattered, I will say, because of the rules that these organizations have. The Guyana Mixed Martial Arts have our rules in terms of safety for the athletes, and so does the IMMAF. They have rules, they have guidelines, and like every other sport, as you would have mentioned before, boxing, karate, taekwondo, judo, sambo, each of these arts have rules. Right. But we enjoy the fun of it because it's a test of skill. It's basically a test of skill. So what we do is we know the rules, we train to protect ourselves. It's the same thing throughout any martial arts. That's why we can combine all the different styles and be able to call it mixed martial arts, because the rules governing them are basically the same. We may have variations in the rules, but at the end of the day, we do need to respect each of our opponents. We do need to respect our coaches. We do need to respect our instructors. We do need to respect our committees, our sponsors. We need to respect everybody. We do need to adhere to the rules and guidelines of our, as we stress so much, the anti-doping. You must adhere to the rules and regulations of the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts, and by extension, the International Mixed Martial Arts, because we fall under you guys. So in essence, I will say yes, because we deal with discipline, right? And as much as Doc would have mentioned that some of the athletes are from the Guyana Police Force, we have the respect of those policemen, whether what rank they are. We have that respect from them, coming that, hey, you are our coach, you are our sensei. We want the best out of this. We want to win medals. We want to compete. We want to showcase Guyana, right? And they want the experience, and they're also gaining the experience of traveling to various countries and being able to experience different cultures, different types of styles, different types of fighters. You know, at all times, you have to protect yourself. If you're fighting, whether it be boxing, whichever sport, combat sport, you have to protect yourself. So in terms of safety, yes, there are injuries. In every sport, there's injuries. You're running, you have injuries.
Right.
You know, you're playing cricket, you have injuries. You know, so some things cannot be avoided, but at all times you have to protect yourself.
Right. No, this is great. I ask those questions because there's still, as I mentioned, there's still folks who may not fully, who see sports a certain way, and they see two people in an octagon and they're like, wait a minute, this is, you know what I mean? Is this safe? Of course
brutal.
It's safe. Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, it's, we're talking about, something that was seen that way almost 30 years ago, but it's evolved and it's changed, and it's one of the fastest growing sports, combat sports worldwide, extremely popular at the professional level, of course, and as well as the amateur scene here, as we're seeing. Now, I have a few more questions for you folks. I really appreciate your time. And I'm asking this one because I think it's an important one to discuss. It's about the importance of communicating clean sport, right? As in anti-doping. May I ask, whose responsibility, generally speaking, whose responsibility is it to communicate clean sport within a team? Is it the entire team, or is it the coaches? Is it the medical staff, the support staff? Whose role is it to really educate and kind of push the importance and value of clean sport in amateur MMA? And anyone, please jump in on this.
Well, let me jump in first. I think it starts with the individual themselves. If you are an athlete, you have to respect your sport, your discipline. That's the first thing. And I just mentioned it. And respect is key. Now, with that being said, I will also add that it also has to be a team effort. Because I reiterated in the dojo, I reiterated in the ring, I reiterated even in casual conversation, that this is a clean sport. If you're using any medication, any injury, you need to share with us so that we can ensure that it doesn't affect you. If you're going to be in the training camp, you cannot consume alcoholic beverages, you cannot be smoking, you cannot be going against all the guidelines and rules. So we reiterate that. But again, as a team, because a team is not just only the athletes and the coaches, the team is the athletes, the coaches, the executives, and the entire body. So we all, as a collaborative effort, reiterate these things with the athletes so as to make sure, and as Dr. Sawan said earlier in our conversation and our interview, is that we're here to put Guyana on the map. And the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation is growing and rapidly. And we are not going to tolerate or have any instance whereby we're going to have a situation whereby athletes are going to discredit the organization, by extension, again, the IMMAF, and also themselves and us as the committee. So we stress it, and I think we have full participation of the athletes on this, but at the same time, we have strategic processes to ensure that we do our checks and balances to ensure that it is maintained.
Right on. And Doctor, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll just speak short. Just for a little structural approach of how it happens, when it comes to the whole sporting aspect of, a fair sport. IMMAF has its policy. All right. We in our local organization or local federation adopts that policy also, right? And within our policy, that is why you'll find that I will be at most of the forums sometimes because of the importance of anti-doping within IMMF and why the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation has to stress on anti-doping, right? Because they see it as an ethical issue. They also see it as fair play. They also see it as a form of honesty. They also see it as a form of compliance to the sport. They also see it as safety because sometimes you will find that persons may use a drug that can weaken their bones, their joints, and so forth, right? So we don't want the athlete to be at risk. And most and importantly, the reputation of the sport, right? It is the fastest growing sport, but at the same time, when you're in the ring, you have your referee, you have your judges, you have everybody around who actually assess what is happening, and they can make a decision in a split second. You don't know. Sometimes an athlete go in there and they last only 20 seconds. All right.
Right.
So it all depends on what transpire on the day of your fight. In Guyana, we have clubs from the Guyana Police Force. We have private clubs, right? But so we have public and private clubs, right? So all basically sign up with the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation to adhere to these protocols. And everyone is willing to ensure that they have all these indicators monitored for their athletes, coaches, administrators, senior athletes, experienced athletes, because you want the conversation to be alive. You don't want it to be something that we will talk about it today and we'll forget it tomorrow. We want this conversation to keep alive, to keep growing, to be informative, and to make people conscious, right? Because if we are going to ensure that we follow the path of IMMAF, we got to start at this level.
Right.
And if we don't start, we are not going to actually reach where we want to go, right? Like the Caribbean, and Guyana share a number of things with the Caribbean when it comes to our culture, our ethnicity, our social aspect and so forth, our music and everything. So we have a center to play also, because we are also learning from our neighboring countries on what mixed martial arts is. And we are growing it in our land because that is how we share information at this level. With that, I also want to commend again the IMMF Safe Committee, right, or the Anti-Doping Committee that is actually working tirelessly to ensure that the protocols them are kept. Like we are going to send athletes to Mexico. All the records of the athletes are with me. Nobody sees them. Confidentiality is actually key. I'm the only one responsible to deliver this information to IMMAF, right? And everyone in the federation are aware. They never asked, they never pressured me at any point in time to review this information, all right? But if an athlete is not fit, I seek guidance from the IMMF. They have that twinning mechanism where we can actually get information, get advice. How do you approach this? All right. So you have to compliment them on that. Though it's a huge art federation, they are ready to actually lend that support.
Yeah, it's It's really interesting, and you know, I must say, it's from a sport development perspective, it'll be interesting to see where Guyana is 5 years from now as far as, you know, amateur mixed martial arts, because you know, as you guys are really laying the foundation and you're working at all levels, you know, starting from where you are, but with connecting with IMMAF, and how this sort of dynamic impacts the rest of the Caribbean, you know, and other federations potentially, and how they develop the sport. So it's going to be interesting on many levels, not just the athletes, but how MMA is kind of is growing and is developing but you know, by leadership in Guyana, but potentially across the Caribbean. And of course, we've got the Pan American Games coming up in a couple of weeks, folks. How's the team doing?
If I may interject,
Sure.
one of the things I want to stress also that happened during the pandemic is that our federation was probably the first federation in Guyana that had all the athletes, coaches, and executives that were fully vaccinated.
Wow. I think I read something that, to thank you for sharing that. I think I read something that it was one of the, like, as far as one of the only countries from the Caribbean that was at the Worlds because of, don't quote me on that, but I think I read something along those lines, because you guys were all fully vaccinated and you adhere to the standard. And you know, that's leadership, right? That's demonstrating leadership on all levels, which is awesome. But speaking of leadership, we've got the Pan Am Games coming up in a couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see how your team does, guys. Tell us a little bit about the team. How's the team doing? Drop some names and tell us about some of these competitors. We're curious to know. I think there's a selection process currently undergoing, or is that done?
Yes. Well, we have already selected the team members who are going. And we're very proud to say that we will be having a young female who will be competing in the tournament, the Pan Am tournament, on June 20th to 22nd. So look out. We have on our team, we've shortlisted 4 members. We have Ijaz Cave, who would have been for the Guyana Police Force, who would have been at the tournament, the World Tournament in Dubai. And we have Trevlon Carr. We have Shanice Bob, which is the female that I just mentioned. And we also have Kyle Ramsey. So they're all in camp right now, and training is ongoing. I wouldn't let the cat out of the bag about what's going on with the training. But they're all getting ready. They're eager, excited, full of spirits, full of life. The minute you don't have something ready for them, they come to you, hey, is this available? We're ready to go. So they're very enthusiastic about getting there and getting their fists in the ring. So training for them is ongoing. We have a lot of cross training happening, as I mentioned earlier. There are a few things that they need to get sorted out in terms of training, but it's a work in progress.
Very interesting. And, you know, at the Pan American Games, we're going to have elite amateurs from across the Americas, right? From North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, competing in Mexico. What does this opportunity mean for these athletes? And also the momentum from amateur sports development in Guyana. What does it all mean?
Doctor, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, as I mentioned earlier, it creates an awareness. All right. When that awareness is actually there, then it promotes the sports. All right. So when it promotes the sports, you have more persons who want to join. And when you have persons who want to join, you have more budding athletes in the next tournament.
Right.
So it's a process. Guyana is going through a process, and we are not moving from that. We just keep growing. I can tell you, under the leadership of Major Gavin Singh, he's really, keen. He's enthusiastic about pushing this federation forward. He's the president of the federation, and Mr. Troy Phillips is the vice president, and they have been doing a remarkable job to ensure that the sport is promoted in how it should be done. And everything is actually done under a monitoring mechanism, whether it's the sports initially, whether it's financial, whether it's anti-doping, everything has to be handed over as a report back to the Caribbean body, who is headed by Mr. Jason Fraser. And have been a pivotal person in assisting us to grow this far, right? So the sport in itself is that, because all of us are young enthusiasts and we want to see something happen. We want to make this possible.
Right.
And I guess, we love what we're doing. I mean, when Roland and Gavin pulled me into this, I was wondering where I was going, but it's actually something that, I believe that has potential for Guyana. And we haven't actually seen the cream of the crop as yet, but we are building a foundation to reach there.
It's great to see and hear, and I think that enthusiasm is really it comes across, from, as I mentioned in the articles and in the videos on the media side of things. You guys are certainly doing a great job promoting it, and it's making, I think it'll make a lot of people curious about Guyana, where Guyana will go in terms of potentially being a hotbed for amateur MMA. When you get everything lined up as you're describing, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm curious to see that, to be honest, in the next 5 to 10 years. You've already mentioned there's an athlete professionally fighting in the UFC, and from Guyana, and who knows, there may be more. And it's interesting to see that. I wouldn't be surprised, of course, because once you move up the ranks on the amateur side, eventually you do your time on the amateur side, and if you choose, you transition on the professional side. So it's great.
Yeah.
That's it, guys. I'm putting you under the spot. This is the last question. I really appreciate your time. We've gone a bit over, but I'm enjoying this, and I hope you are as well. How do you think the team will do at the Pan American Games? What are you hoping for? What's the goal?
We're hoping to come back with some medals. That's the first thing. And I think that we're going to have a fair chance at medaling this time. We have a little more experience under our belt, and we are working to make sure that we train the athletes to be able to be aware of different techniques that might come at them that they may not be familiar. So we're mixing it up a little bit so that they can have a better understanding of, it's not just one style. You just got to be able to transition from one to the other, So We're working with them on that. So we are definitely hoping to bring back medals for each of our members.
Outstanding. Outstanding. So, sorry, go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah. I am not training athletes, but I'm ensuring that they're all safe. But so far, all 4 of our athletes are actually cleared and ready to perform. So I'm happy to report that. And we are putting out clean athletes for the tournament.
That's outstanding, folks. For anyone who wants to watch the Pan American Games, you can catch the action on IMMAF Live. Sign up and watch the 2022 IMMAF Pan American Championship live. As I mentioned, it's going down June 22nd to the 24th. You don't want to miss it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and all the best to the team. And who knows, let's maybe do a follow-up interview a few years from now when, Guyana is taking over all the podiums. It could happen. You never know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Garmamie, for having us. It was a pleasure. I was very excited that you took the time out to help to bring Guyana and the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation into the limelight. This is a great step for us, and we would like to thank you so much for having us here and having us be a part of your panel.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much. I want to interview the athletes maybe after the championships. If we can make that happen, that would be fantastic.
Probably during the championships would be better
Okay.
because
Sure.
you will probably get a more hyped person, ready how they're feeling towards the match and things
Yeah.
like that. So, and they would get a sense of boost at the same time.
You know what?
All in all, yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know what, doctor, I agree with that professional recommendation. That's a good point. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, so
Feel the
basically,
energies.
so on behalf of the Guyana Mixed Martial Arts Federation, I want to say thank you for, as Roland said, putting us on the limelight. And at the same time, trying to get what we're doing here, how we are actually maintaining the integrity of the sport, how we're actually pushing the sport in Guyana, how we're actually representing IMMAF at a local level, and most of all, respecting the federation to the highest level. And with that, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, gentlemen. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night.